So I'm Jeremy. If you're watching this, you probably already know me because it's not like I have a YouTube following or something. But you probably saw this on social media. This is my friend from back in college. We actually went to we were involved in the same Christian fellowship, and we're roommates for, was it several years, I think?
I think officially only 1 year.
Okay.
Senior year.
So Hanwei, I think you go by Ken now, Kantzer. And you're out in LA, and you've worked for like a bunch of different tech companies or like computery stuff. Can you tell me?
Description, yeah.
Yeah, can you explain like a quick overview of the kinds of, in a way that we can understand, you know?
Sure. I mean, I've worked everywhere from working for a tech company that does work for the federal government. So in that work, I worked for the Air Force, some other government agencies. I did a startup for a while, for about 5 years, where we did computer security and software development for a whole bunch of different clients. And then right now I'm also working at a tech startup that's more traditional out in DC, and I'm the head of security for that company. So seen a lot of different things, I guess.
Right. Okay. So can I segue? That's why I wanted to talk to you, and I was hoping our other friend could join us, but I'm not sure if he can. But let me tell you what sparked my desire to talk to you guys. You guys are kind of like go-to tech consultants, you know, but you're also people of faith in Jesus, like me. And so I posted this thing, you know, a couple weeks ago after watching this segment on Netflix, and I remember texting you guys afterward. I said, "So you guys need to watch this," you know. And I said, you know, Discerning the Times, right? That's the topic. And I said, Netflix's social dilemma, all right, plus QAnon. So some of you guys know about this phenomenon. Some people would call it a conspiracy theory. Other people would say it's, you know, well, it's revealing just kind of a underbelly of government and all these kind of things that are going on in our times. Okay, so QAnon. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But QAnon plus 2020 election plus our current political polarization plus racial intercultural injustice. Right, plus our post-truth, post-expertise, alternative facts society. Right, plus our collective mental health decline, plus our deteriorating social and relational fabric, plus our decreasing social skill competencies, especially in young people, plus the COVID pandemic, plus people being stuck at home online on their phones, plus the skyrocketing gap between the rich and the poor. You know, as many of us have seen, like during the pandemic, billionaires have gotten richer. Like some of their wealth has like doubled, right? Plus the geographic isolation or segregation of many of us by race, wealth, socioeconomics. Plus apocalyptic end times theologies, plus social isolation and loneliness. And then I was like, ... right? And so my point was like, I was like, man, there's a lot of things going on. But and all of that thinking about the complexities of all these things going on was sparked by watching that documentary, Social Dilemma, right? And it's been on Netflix, like top 10 for probably about a month. And I was like, I need to find some people to talk to me about this documentary, you know? Mm-hmm. Just because it's a part of the puzzle piece to understanding the crazy times. And my friend posted in reaction, he said, in order to discern the times in 2020, you have to be an epidemiologist. And those are the people who study like wide-scale diseases, right? An economist, an historian, a criminal justice expert, a philosopher, a theologian, a political scientist, an educator, a psychologist, an athletic trainer, a foreign policy expert, and a computer expert. So I was like, I think that's true. And I think we need to be talking to each other to learn and discern. We get stuck in our little silos of thinking,
Mm.
and you guys are the guys that understand computer stuff better. But I asked you guys what you thought about watching it, and so I think you watched it, right? Social
Yeah.
Dilemma.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to see what you're
Absolutely.
seeing, what you're thinking in reaction to that documentary. If you're watching this and haven't seen Social Dilemma, go ahead and watch it. If you don't have a Netflix account, feel free to ask me and I can give you access to mine to watch it. But this is assuming you've watched it. All right. So anyways, you have thoughts. I have thoughts. I want to see what's going on in your mind, especially as someone who is a person of faith in Jesus and understands technology, the kind of things they were talking about with a lot of jargon, better than the rest of us. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been like a week now since I've watched it, I think. And I think the main thing that stuck out in my mind, the main image that stuck out in my mind from that was the image of a puppeteer, like a shadowy puppeteer kind of pulling the strings of the main characters in the social dilemma, and how that kind of represented what companies like Facebook are doing to us. We just can't tell because there aren't any strings actually attached to us, but the strings are through our eyeballs into the screens we're looking at, and other devices that we have now, like Amazon's Echo Dot.
right.
A lot of the watches we wear are smart watches now. A lot of the other things we have speakers on them. So I'm I'm curious what you think about that, Jeremy, because it kind of goes into the aspect of discerning the times. And I think when you're talking about large scale systems like this, it's a really easy analogy to bring up, which is the puppeteer pulling our strings and manipulating us. And I guess um the big question is, in the case of social media, is the social media people are arguing, well, it's just the computers that are actually doing that. And that's interesting because in the movie you see, they have that room where they're kind of serving up ads. Like they have three people talking to each other, serving up ads. And that character is actually, ironically, in Mad Men. He's one of the advertisers in Mad Men. But is that an accurate and fair depiction of what's happening? Is it fair to have the humans there serving up ads when it's actually computers?
Right. And behind the scenes, they're like intentionally trying to alter your opinions through these actions that they're making. Right? That's how it's trying to show the agency that's very nefarious, and that
the characters almost like they're like plotting, right? And I think it very so.
Well, I want to hear what you think first before I respond to that, because I have some thoughts, but I want to hear how, because you're the one that knows the under the behind the scenes, the zeros and ones. You better understand that as someone who actually programs and knows how those algorithms work. Which I know some people aren't familiar with algorithms, but basically just kind of like an algorithm is kind of like the rules that tell the computer what to do, including like YouTube telling it what to do. When it sees that you like these kinds of videos, it feeds you more of this kind of video. So it's an algorithm that does it. It's not like a person behind a computer typing things to tell. It's like actually the algorithm. And as part of the documentary is saying, the algorithm is designed to feed you things that you like. And then because YouTube wants to get you clicking and watching for longer so that they make more money based on advertisements, the product of that, of giving you what you like, tends to radicalize. It's a pattern that gives people it, like they follow the rabbit trail, right? and it's addictive. They follow the rabbit trail down into very strange corners of the internet where they're watching videos that make you think very strange ideas that don't map onto reality anymore, right? You become more and more isolated from, but they're saying that the algorithm did that, right?
Right.
It wasn't individual people that chose to like work it's not like someone at YouTube is like, I want to find a way to create as many radical people as possible. It's just somehow the system they set up with these algorithms tends to do that, right? So
Right.
that's the
It leads
argument. What
them.
do you think about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's both probably more scary and less scary than that. It's less scary in that the algorithms aren't very smart. That's the ultimate reality is um, they're good at copying what they've already seen. They aren't particularly good at creating novelty. So like a great example of this is apparently there are like tens of thousands of videos on YouTube that are targeted at children, where they've essentially taken Disney characters and cartoon characters from different stories and used algorithms to kind of uh, generate thousands and thousands of videos with different scenarios happening that like kind of don't make sense. And they recently discovered this and they stopped it because it was kind of a good example of something. It was very creepy to watch. Like if you watched it, you and I would be able to tell very easily that it was like basically trash in terms of content. But if your 3-year-old is watching it, they're not really going to know any better, and they may start on a Disney video, like clips from a Disney movie, but 20 videos of autoplay later, they're on these like very almost psychedelic video content. And I think the example there is like that's obviously damaging. Like I don't think anyone would say that that is good for children. But I also don't think it's true that the people who created those algorithms were trying to like manipulate or psychologically damage children. I think they were just trying to make tons of money by, kind of cranking out and churning out um, the equivalent of like fast food in terms of entertainment for children. And they didn't really care whether it was good content or not. So I think, that's the example on children. I think what's happening with the algorithms is very similar. It's, um, really smart engineers at Facebook come up with these algorithms, and their main metric for seeing whether their algorithms are good or bad is, does it keep you watching? And
Right.
so that's going to have an effect. That's going to create consequences. And I think it's probably fair to say that they didn't really think through those consequences
Right.
while they were doing that. And that's what the situation we're in.
Right.
That's kind of my interpretation, at least.
Right. And so the temptation after watching that, I mean, it really tries to. I sent you guys an article too later that is kind of from the flip side that's trying to say, hey, you guys are painting Facebook a little bit too strongly in a negative light, like in terms of like what you were saying, it's actually trying to pull strings and be evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my worry as I watched it and I was like, whoa, I think it really did a really good job showing the intense power of social media,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I do think that it has a potential to help for the unwise user to help radicalize people into strange corners of the internet and strange perspectives. Um, and to even if it's not like strange and dangerous perspectives, it can be very, the whole phenomenon um, where we have silos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the left and the right are the farthest polarized they've ever been, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I I'm sure that they're going to prove at some point that the rise of social media and the rise of this polarization happening at the same time are not a coincidence,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so for me, though, I worry that the blame can turn social media into this kind of like it's another part of this sort of like conspiracy of organizations like Facebook, whatever, Amazon, the kind of organization you're talking about that are intentionally trying to do this to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I want to say they may not be intentionally doing it to us, right? But we should not be naive about the power of a tool to reshape us. And I think Becker, our friend Becker, who was probably going to join us, I know he's listened to a lot to some people that talk about technology. Technology is not super neutral. You know, we like to say technology is neutral. It's just how you use it, right? It's like a hammer is neutral. If you hit it on the head, someone on the head is not good, but if you hit on a nail. So, you know, that idea makes technology sound very neutral. And it's sort of true, but like there's a sense in which technology still has a shape to it in how it can potentially connect to our natural human nature and shape us in certain directions, right? But there's always a sense in which it's gotta be we give into it, right? So my worry is if we kind of take social media and say, kind of the same way, say the devil made me do it. Social media created us this way, and I want to say it can point us in a certain direction, but it doesn't force you to go down that path, right? And you know, there's probably some nuance in there that we could talk about, but yeah, for me, as I think about another way I think about it is like social media is mirroring back to us kind of our tendencies, which is we're very addictive creatures and we want to go down paths and we want to be right and we want to. And so say you have more left-leaning views, like what is it that keeps you watching more and more left and kind of find stuff that is only in your sphere so you can't even have conversations with people on the right anymore, right? What is it that does that? Well, I think arguably if you really had the motivation to listen to someone on the right, you know, you could, you know, even if the YouTube algorithm tells you here's another video by your favorite left-leaning pundit, whatever, right? You could go to the search bar and search like conservative perspective on whatever issue, right? Whatever news topic. And so I think that I guess I really appreciated the social dilemma. And my first reaction was, whoa, you know, same as most people's reaction, right? But then as I thought about it a little bit more, I was like, okay, let's not be too, what's the right word, alarmist, that it's just like the devil made me do it. Social media is out to get me, you know? I think that a good reaction is to step back and say, how many hours am I on my computer, on my phone, on whatever, right? I think that's a good common sense step to take.
Yeah, and most smartphones now have tools that allow you to monitor and collect weekly statistics about how much you're using various apps, and it's really telling to look at those. Every once in a while, my wife take out our phones and compare, kind of make it a competition to see who's been on Facebook and other social media less. But it's hours a day, and you might not even know it. For me, I think of myself as someone who goes on Facebook almost never really do these things, and I look and it's like 2-3 hours a day. I'm like, how is it even possible? But it is. And there's that Bible verse that I mentioned to you before about like what we allow into our eyes informs what's in our hearts, and that's very, very true. And so you just have to be really careful where you're allowing your sources of stimulation and knowledge to be, because that's going to shape you. The other thing that you said that I think is like trying to see other perspectives. This is the other thing that I think has made social media different than, say, you were living in the 1800s. I think in the 1800s, you'd be living in a small town. Everyone would probably have very similar views, and you'd have a little bit of that echo chamber.
Yeah.
But the damaging thing these days is, and you'll see this on news shows too that are pretty biased, where they won't just show you the common echo chamber. They'll actually show you videos, extended videos of the other side. But it's what they're choosing to show you. And the powerful thing there is it makes you think you understand what the other side is actually saying. But what you're hearing is very carefully curated clips that take things out of context, that take like the worst thing that they said in the last week.
Right.
And when that's all you hear, you develop this image in your mind of what the person with the other side, the other viewpoint from than you has, that's very corrupted and not accurate. And so at least for me, that's convicting, is like, I think that kind of leaves you in a bind, because I think oftentimes you don't even know who on the other side represents the fair viewpoint, who on the other side represents the realistic. You only know the people who are like way on the far side. Like, for example, if you're a Republican, you only know what like AOC and like that gang says. And if you're on the Democratic side, you only hear Trump's perspective and
Right.
like his worst tweets,
Right.
retweeted
You
at
don't
you
even hear
thousands
any
of
of the.
times.
I know I'll probably get flack from people that are more left leaning. You don't hear anything positive or neutral that Trump is doing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
some people would argue that there's none of that, but you only hear the most inflammatory. I totally resonate with that. I think that that's accurate. I mean, the hard thing is I don't know that there's an individual people trying to make that happen. I think that that's just what emerges as out of the reality that what's shiny and fancy is what grabs those people's attention, and those people then take picture, tweet, whatever about it, and then we watch
Mm-hmm.
those people what they, you know. And it's good. This gets back to that what you're saying in terms of what we pay attention to. There's this other verse. It sounds so like, you know, the advice sounds so like trite and like old fashioned, right? But it's like, you know, this is talking about attention, right? They talk about the attention economy now, right? It's like where people get money. And I think the documentary even talked about where you get money is by directing people's attention, right? I want you to be watching this video this long. And you know, I mean, this verse, Philippians 4, says, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about those things, or pay attention to those things, right? And you know, just the idea of like stewarding our attention in a way that sort of allows us to love others, right? I mean, not just kind of be stuck in like a demonizing other people's perspectives. And you know, social media, the fact that it's out there should not prevent us from being able to be good listeners, right? Which should be something that we mature into. If we are following Jesus, we should be able to be very good listeners. But I want to ask you another question. Like, this is a little bit more technical. This relates to that stuff, but I think for a lot of us, we don't have enough understanding of the mechanics of this stuff to know what to think. But there's this term that they use: surveillance capitalism and data mining. Okay, you understand those terms, and my basic understanding of it is something like this, right? Like, what people really want, these big companies, is your data, right? Data about you, right? Like, they want to know like what you like. They want to know, you know, this person spent this many minutes looking at this kind of content or this kind of advertisement, or they clicked on this advertisement, or they did this, or, you know, and companies want your data because obviously that if they buy that data, if they find it, they can use that to maybe not intentionally, like a person behind clicks and said, I want to send them this, but the algorithm, right, can use that to direct things towards you that there's more likelihood that you'll spend money, right? It's always anything about money, right? That's my understanding of what this idea of surveillance, capitalism, data mining is about. And then, of course, for the run-of-the-mill person like me, when I watch that kind of stuff, it becomes like, oh man, this is those, what all those, you know, books, what was it, Animal Farm? You know, the ones that are talking about like surveillance, and we're all being watched by Big Brother. And, you know, people have heard that that's what it's like in China now. You know, they have all these cameras on every corner where almost all of your data, you know, they know about it, the Big Brother, the government, or whatever. So that's what, you know, when we hear surveillance, our brain goes to, at least mine, I think a lot of people, just jumps to the worst case scenario. And I want you to help us understand, where are we with that? Like, how do you think about the data that's being gathered on us? Like, are you worried? Are you like, yeah, just help us understand this a little bit, because you grasp that world better than we do. I think we just kind of have this kind of sci-fi picture of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, don't let me forget this, but like I think there's some great links now that are starting to form where you can go and see. So, example, if you're like a Gmail user, where you can go and see everything that Google knows about you. And I need to find. I'll find that link while we're talking. But stuff like that is really. I mean, see for yourself. Like, go to stuff like that, and some people go to that and they're like, oh, this isn't that bad. That's good. That means you're keeping under the radar. But some people, they go there and it's like literally their entire lives where they've traveled because they use Google Maps. um, Obviously all the contents of your emails, um, what they've shopped based on what they Google searched and clicked in terms of shopping, like what restaurants they want to go to, again, Google Maps, where people live that they know, and where they live, and a history of that going back as long as they've used Gmail. I think that's kind of a thing that a lot of these are emerging. They're not creepy in the moment. It's not as creepy that Google knows where I went yesterday, because it's like, okay, well, like, so do all my friends and so do I. It's really creepy when Google remembers where you went like 15 years ago, because Google's been around that long now. And in 30 years, it'll be Google knew where you were 40 years ago,
Right.
long after anyone else probably remembered. And so those links are really revealing. I would say the other thing that you said that I kind of want to clarify is it's not always done to make you buy things. I think that, and that's a really important thing, because if in the case of Facebook, people take out ads and they're paying Facebook money to target you to make you believe something. And like everyone's seen that now. It's election season. Every single person, if you've been using the internet, you have gotten an ad for some political campaign.
Yeah.
They're not trying to get you to buy anything.
Right.
They're trying to get you to vote for a particular side, to believe a certain thing, to like it, so that more people see it, so that those people are now impacted by it. And I think that's a really key distinction, where Facebook's claims that it's just advertising, Google's claims it's just advertising, is a little hard to understand and keep track of. And there's differences between these. So for example, Amazon, is there a difference between Amazon and Facebook? Like, should I be concerned differently on Facebook than Amazon? Because like I'm giving them both data. They're both doing data mining, like you're saying. They're both technically doing surveillance capitalism. Well, I don't know. I think in Amazon's case, so far, people aren't really putting political messaging. Most of what Amazon will be doing is giving you ads to buy things. And so, I mean, you have to decide for yourself how damaging that is.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot more interesting in the case of Facebook, because they have your contacts, your social contacts. They have the ways that you're interacting with people in private, and they understand, and they can leverage those trust relationships in ways that make you believe things. And I think we saw in the last election that there are governments and there are entities out there that know that and will use it to their advantage to try to convince you of things. And so I really like that quote in Social Dilemma, with the guy with the crazy hair, um, who invented what did he invent? He invented virtual reality, essentially, right? He was one
Yeah,
of the key
for sure. Yeah, I
inventors
don't
of
know
it.
how to pronounce his name. It's Jaron Lanier, I think. I know I'm butchering it, but Jaron Lanier. Yeah.
Yeah. And he has some other things that I kind of want to read at some point, but he made a really good point, which actually helps clarify that it's not just buying things in the traditional advertising sense that's the problem here. He said people say that in Facebook, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And he's like, that's true, but the more accurate thing to say is um, what Facebook is selling is the gradual and slight imperceptible change in your own behavior and perception. And that's the product.
Right.
And I thought that was brilliant. And that's how you need to be thinking. That's a really important thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're on Facebook and you're going through your feed, is to like just every once in a while take a step back and ask yourself, like, what is this trying to make me believe? And I think that's
Even
just really important.
even
Yeah.
if it's not a person is trying to make me believe it, right?
Hmm.
But if you say the algorithm and the way things work, it functions almost like the way Facebook, when you're doing it, there is a sense in which it's like it is trying to make me do something. There may not be a person behind it saying, ha ha ha, like we were saying, the people pulling the strings.
Hmm.
But I think it's important, like you're saying, there is still a sense that the algorithm is trying to do something to me, right?
Hmm.
And for me, perhaps because, okay, so when I was young, I grew up, my parents always were like cynical about advertising.
Hmm.
And I say this in the best sense. I think that they were like, yeah, these ads, they're just trying to sell you stuff. Like, don't pay attention to all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then, so even the, like, you know, I don't remember, like funny Super Bowl ads, right? I was always had this super, like, very cynical perspective. And it
Hmm.
sounds like what you're trying to say is it's wise, given, yes, this data mining, yes, how that works is really trying to imperceptibly, slowly shape you, inform you over time. Uh, that you should be really cynical about it, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
mean don't participate and don't use Facebook in a certain way, but be very cynical about the fact that it will try to shape you a certain way.
Yeah.
Fair?
And again, like, is Facebook different than Google and different from Amazon? This is really important. And like, just an example, I was reading this book called Googleplex about Google. And one of the things that they did right was, and that they did differently than other search engines, is when you type something into Google, you'll get what, 10 search results, and then you'll get ads, right? But the thing that Google did that was so different was they made it very clear what was an ad and what wasn't. And even now they've kind of combined. It used to be that Google's ads were on the side and like very clear, like, okay, this is an ad, these are your search results. Now it's a little more combined, but it still says ad in front of it, right? Like a little letter ad, 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 and then you get to the search results. And um and that's a huge difference than what Facebook is doing. In Facebook, it's your news feed, right? Like your one flick, you're looking at your friend's post. The next flick, you're looking at some random video. The next flick, you're looking at a video. And I want to make something also clear. And Facebook does not tell you when you're getting an ad a
Hmm.
lot of times.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes they do. So if you're watching like a Facebook video and you get to the best part and then they stop and show you like a Tide commercial, okay, that's like obviously an ad. And then there'll be some times where we'll say like promoted, but a lot of the stuff on there I would consider advertisements, even if it's not explicitly an ad. And so that's the big difference in Google. It would be like in Google, imagine if you're going through search results and you don't know which link someone's paid money to show on the front page, even though it has maybe nothing to do with your search results,
Mm-hmm.
and which is actually there because it's useful and valuable to people. That's a big difference. And that's something that you have to understand is very intentional in terms of what they're doing. Is they're trying to mix the things that people are paying for into the things that that's actual content from like your friends and stuff like that. And being aware of that is really important. And then also, just in the back of your mind, you should treat almost everything you see like an ad on Facebook. I would say the exception of that is probably posts from people you know directly.
Mm-hmm.
Literally everything. If it's a post, even something shared from someone you know, treat that like an ad, because the algorithms know what will be interesting to you, and you can't trust that what they're showing you is the totality of all the shares of your friends. There's a very particular reason why that particular share from your friend is showing up in your newsfeed. And um, so I would say most of us need a much broader definition of, when we're on social media, what we're considering to be ads.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah. Again, I keep things from scripture. I keep resonating. Like, I mean, I guess some of it is common sense when it comes to um, the insights from scripture. Like, it was like, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right?
Mm,
And I just keep thinking, like,
mm,
there's a sense in which um, how our minds, Jesus isn't surprised by social media, the evolution of social media. And yet he spoke those words in a time that it would still be relevant for our times. What does it look like to allow our minds to be renewed and constantly connected to, put on the mind of Christ kind of thing? To have, or other places it's talking about discerning the spirits, right? Discerning what's going on. There's that passage about the sons of Issachar. I don't know if you've heard that. I'd have to look up where that is. But I remember it talking about the sons of Issachar had a more remarkable discernment, ability to know what the times and see what's going on, And so there's a sense on which I think this is really trying to not just scare us into thinking like everything is, it's just everything's conspiracy out to get me. But it is to give us a sense of like, know the way these tools, if you're not careful, can shape us. And I also want to say, like I think the conversation's being had, right? I mean, there are people at these companies that are working on, like, that are aware, that are being held accountable, like at Facebook, at other, like Amazon, Google. It's not like there's nobody that's trying to rein it in. Like there's people within their companies that are trying to say, hey, okay, let's be careful about, how we're shaping people. And, I've seen, like you're saying, like our phones all do this thing now. They're all really emphasizing screen usage time. So I'm careful not to paint those companies as the big bad wolf, right? Even though I do think that, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into that, like how much money they make and all these things, but there is some sense in which people are trying to work on alleviating the way that those tools can unintentionally, like probably the YouTube algorithm thing, they're probably trying to work on that, right? To make it not allow it to be easy to go down these weird rabbit holes that radicalize you to join a terrorist group, right? Like if they're realizing it's doing that to a lot of people, and we created the tool, and we could argue that we didn't do that. Those people clicked on those links, but you're realizing it's really helping a lot of people do it. They're probably trying to work on those things in the back end, right?
Yeah.
Companies.
Yeah, and they are for sure. And I think it's sometimes they're trying to do, I think they're genuinely trying to do a good job there, because they have something at stake. The social media companies have something at stake, which is legitimacy. Like, with movies like this, more and more people are going to be rightly skeptical every time they go onto Facebook of what they're seeing. And that's not good for the social media companies, because they want a believing audience that's willing and being receptive to these ads. And let's keep this in mind too. The vast majority of the money these companies are getting is from big reputable companies that are trying to sell you detergent and like dog food and a watch. Like that's the majority of the money, and that's the money that these companies want. However, they've built a platform that allows them to accept money from anyone and for any reason. And a lot of the bad people like terrorist organizations, extremists are, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, they basically realized how to like essentially kind of like hack Facebook to achieve their ends. And they're like, oh, apparently I can pay like pretty small amounts of money, and like suddenly my microphone becomes 5,000 times bigger than it was before. And I'm actually succeeding in like getting real people to come fly out to Iran and Iraq to like join my group
Right.
through this means. Um, and so what Facebook is doing is they're trying to rein in the ability of groups like that, who they don't really want on their platform, to be there. But it's hard. And I think what we're seeing here is that they're smart, but there's a lot of smart people around here, and it's a game of cat and mouse. And so, or whack-a-mole is probably the better example. And Facebook is shutting down some of these groups that are abusing the system, but then they're popping up in other places. And they didn't think about it early on, and now they're kind of paying the consequences for
All right, so I've got a question that connects to this stuff,
that. Mm.
um, but it goes beyond the documentary. So, like, you have tons of conversations with people that do programming and all these kind of tech stuff all day, and you guys, I'm sure, talk about these kind of things oftentimes. And I'm sure you guys are thinking about where things are headed, right? So my question is like 5, 10 years from now, right? Where are we in your guess when it comes to social media, when it comes to, um, when it comes to these things like data mining, right? Where these big companies have your data, where it comes to like, yeah, where are we? And let me tell you the motivation behind that, right? Because when I think about, we want to push forward with technology, right? Um, it seems like China has gotten really good with like collecting all of this data, right?
Mhm.
And whether you like it or not, if you're okay with all that privacy being taken away, right? If you have all that data, arguably, you can do a lot of things that help a lot of people, right? Like you can make, I don't
Look
know,
at COVID and the contact tracing, right?
right? They can shut down the virus like that because they know, okay, this person got okay, and we know these 5 people, so we immediately isolate them. There's
Hmm.
so many things that can be done when you have, assuming that the surveillance person, the God figure, is good, right? In some ways, you could say God knows all, and is He surveilling us? But He knows He's guiding us in a good way, right?
Hmm.
And so, I could see an argument for trying to, in the U.S., trying to push for just much more data gathering, and I'm sure they're already doing it. Um, and so people can argue that it's positive. So, do you think we'll go in that direction? I mean, and then so when it comes to the data mining stuff, where do you think people will go in the U.S. in the next 5, 10 years? And then also social media. Where do you think things will head in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of different views on that. I'll give you my take. And also one guy who talks about this a lot, and I kind of like his take. And it's interesting. He's not a Christian, but in a lot of ways, he has very similar worldviews, at least to me, and um, what I'm thinking about. And he writes about information security, which is my field, which is how I found him. But he also writes about philosophy and technology in general. And so his name is Daniel Miessler, really interesting guy. I just put his link to his blog there. And he talks a lot about where he thinks this is going. And what he thinks is that um, we have to kind of accept the fact that this technology is around, and we can't go back to what it was before. And I think if you look throughout history, that's pretty fair. I don't think there's any examples in history of a technology we've invented where we collectively decide that it's pointless. A great example of that is even technologies like nuclear technologies. Like we invented the atom bomb. Most people regret that, but cat was out of the bag. And so I think actually what you see with uh, what we did with nuclear technology is basically what you're going to see with social media, which is a couple of things happened. One, it didn't go away. I don't think in 5 to 10 years we're not going to have social media, and I think it's going to look pretty similar to what it looks like now. Maybe it'll be like virtual reality or something. But one thing we did with nuclear weapons is we try to control it. We try to control who had access to it and what they were able to do with it, to varying degrees of success. And I think you'll see that in social media too. To varying degrees of success, you'll see um, places like Facebook really crack down on who is able to influence on that platform. And there'll be a lot more rules and regulations about what those people will be able to do. And it won't be as free for all as it is now. Um, and then a couple other things. One is like, this is something Daniel Miessler says. He's like, part of the reason why we won't be able to stop this technology is because there'll be good things that come out of it.
Hmm.
And so a great example of this is like contact tracing. Like if COVID type things keep on happening, it's going to be really, really hard to argue not to have things like that in place, because they're so useful. Facebook is, let's face it, it's very useful. allows us to talk to friends. If it wasn't for Facebook, a lot of us would be really disconnected right now with COVID. And so, like nuclear technology, we ended up creating stuff like nuclear power, which it had its problems, but it did great things too. And what else will happen? I think the general trend will be that we'll have like more vacillations. I think that's the other thing. I think in general, what you see with technology is it gets more and more powerful per individual, and it empowers individuals to do a lot, both good and ill. And so I think we'll see that get even worse. I don't know what that would look like with social media. Like I can't. It's hard for me to imagine right now people doing even more evil things with it. But I think we'll see that. Well, probably we'll see it being used by political figures even more, like in the same way that Trump uses Twitter. I think to great effect. I think we'll be seeing that even more, and it won't just be the president of the United States. I think you'll see it across the board. And I think the last trend that's worth saying in 5-10 years is what's already starting to happen, which is we call it like the balkanization of the internet, which is essentially where individual countries are going to realize how scary this technology is and how powerful it is, and they'll want to control it. And so I think we're going to see what we're seeing in China elsewhere, where China is basically creating their own internet on all levels. They have their own payment systems, their own Facebook equivalent, their own Google. It's called Baidu. And they're going to keep going down that trend. I think you're going to see a lot of other countries doing the same thing. I think you're going to see like the European Union is going to do it. A lot of the countries in the Middle East.
I interrupt you really quickly? Interrupt you just to explain that. So like when I envision the internet, I think of a massive web, right?
Mm-hmm.
That all these things are connected together. Is it that China's web is completely separate, or is it's like most of it separate and then some links to the other web? Is that how it works? Or
right now it's mostly separate, but there are some links. I think in the next 5-10 years it's going to be completely separate. I don't think it's going to be possible for a person in China to search for things outside of their country's internet, and vice versa.
Completely parallel webs. So like we think about when I search something in Google, I can find something on that web, but like they search their equivalent to Google, they can't access anything on our web. Interesting.
And I think people thought that wasn't possible. That was the big optimistic time in the internet where we thought that like the whole point, it's distributed, it's spread out, you can never stop them. I think we're realizing that's not true. I think China's leading the way, and they're inventing technology that's then being sold to these other countries so that they can do that more easily. So even a country like Iran, which is not super wealthy and doesn't have amazing technology, is able to purchase basically technology that allows them to control the flow of data in and out of their country at a very granular level. And so I think we're going to see a lot more countries get access to that technology and do that. Even not even just repressive regimes. I think India is going to do it. European Union. I think a lot of countries are going to do it, including the US.
Interesting. So yeah, that is really fascinating. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Did you have more that you were going off of, or?
No, that's it.
Yeah, man. I don't know enough to know how accurate your perspective on is in the next 5 to 10 years. But you know, the thought that came to me is that it seems to me that, you know, like when we have something that's presented to us, our reaction tends to be like 100% yes, 100% no, you know? But it seems like what's wise is to just continue to think about it and let it reflect with us over time. And when it comes to thinking about this stuff like social media, you know, like surveillance and like how everybody's got our data and how everything on this works, and our news sources wide enough, or everything just that has anything to do with technology for us, it seems like, you know, as we think about where things are headed, the wise thing is just going to be continue to listen and discern and have conversations with people and reflect and, you know, listen to people like you know, that I'm trusting your perspective a lot more than mine, you know, And a lot of that sounds really wise. I mean, I want to trust people. I do think this is one of my worries, is that
Mm.
one of the things that has happened with this is that we've been empowered to all think we're experts about everything, because you can just Google it. So I do think that
Mm.
I think my opinion is that we're never going to get away from the need for certain subject area experts, um, doesn't matter how far we get in giving power into individuals' hands,
Mm.
and we're always going to need some level of like, let's consult someone that knows and better understands this area subject matter. So it sounds like for us, having an ear to people like you know, over time that are like in that world and kind of understand what's going on behind the scenes, um, is a part of helping us discern kind of in those times. Because you're talking about like, yeah, there may be more powerful tools by then, people that want to take advantage of people can have more power potentially at that point that we haven't imagined yet, and we're gonna have to just stay on our game, right?
Mhm.
And that's what it looks like to exercise the mind of Christ in relation to this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Would you have any, like, I mean, I don't know, like last kind of advice or ways, um, yeah, ways to encourage us or.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave you with something I was thinking about the last maybe few weeks, which is, I don't know if you get this sense too, but like, so I have a Twitter account and like I very rarely tweet, but I often think about tweeting things. And I find that most of the time, I'm curious if this is the same for you, most of the time that I think about tweeting something, I realize that it's a negative sentiment.
Hmm.
Like most of the time where I feel like the most urge to like tweet something, it's negative. And that jives with what I see on on Twitter, which I would say like 98% of what I see on Twitter. Maybe it's just the people I have followed, but like 98% of the time, the sentiment is negative. It's not necessarily just a critical thing, but it's like it's something that doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel like like the bad emotions, angry, sad, depressed,
you're,
hopeless.
you're saying you're venting. It's kind of a venting space for all the negative stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know. Something I've been trying to do myself is to actively refrain from going on social media and contributing to that venting pool. Like, because I've like kind of like you have to ask yourself, like, do people need to hear my depressing thoughts about things? Like, don't they get enough of that already? And sometimes it's necessary to share things that are sad and depressing. I'm not saying that, but like sometimes um I don't think we realize how big of a platform we have when we post, and to either be positive or to be negative. And um the tongue is a very powerful thing. The scripture often talks about the tongue as an incredibly powerful tiller for changing the direction of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And um I think if Christians use social media differently than other people did, it would be a testimony, um, and could be very good.
Yeah, that goes back to what we were talking about listening. I mean, you're
Mm.
saying, it's funny. We don't oftentimes think about posting as the tongue, right?
Mm-hmm,
You're not
mm-hmm.
speaking out loud, but yeah, the power. The other verse says it's lit on fire by hell in James, right? It
Yeah.
burn things down, and so what if we have to listening more, right? But even listening wisely, because we are talking about how you can watch and go on these rabbit trails that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, so discernment and listening and more than we speak is kind of timeless advice, right? But that's really helpful. I found this really helpful for myself, but I hope if anybody watches this, they'll find it helpful. Uh, it's funny because it ends up being same old timeless advice, but I do think it's still, just you giving into the details of how this tech works and how, helping us not be like overly scared, but at the same time being wise, for me, I find really helpful. So I would love to kind of actually personally ask you, like, if we should do some of these kind of things semi-regularly when it comes to just
Yeah.
understanding technology. Because like most of us Christians, like it's just this, like, it's mysterious. The tech world is mysterious to us, right?
Mm,
And so I
yeah.
think we need people that it's not as mysterious to help us discern.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that'd be great. I enjoy learning a lot from your perspective too.